Last week, 873,000 of you watched as well as listened. The second highest viewing audience that we have ever had. And that makes us officially, unless you can tell me otherwise, the biggest show of its kind on the entire planet. A truly global university of the airwaves. You want a comparator? The BBC's flagship programme Newsnight struggles to get over 200,000 viewers. It's on 5 nights a week. It only just beats us on 5 programmes. It's not even a quarter of our current level of viewership. And that's without a single mention in any of the so-called mainstream media. So if you are one of those watching now on Facebook, please share with all of your friends, all of your contacts. You can watch, of course, on my Facebook, on RT's multiple Facebook pages. You can watch on my YouTube and on RT's multiple YouTube platforms. You can watch on Twitter, and you can even watch on Instagram and something called Twitch, which always makes me shiver. Now, as I was coming into the studio, the news broke that Syrian mercenaries were speeding to the front in Nagorno-Karabakh, transported there by the Turkish regime of Erdogan, transferred to Azerbaijan, who have announced that they are going to finish this Nagorno-Karabakh problem. A kind of final solution. And that would be appropriate, because the last time a Turk talked about finishing anything to do with Armenians, it led to a genocide, second only to the Holocaust, just some years later in the run-up to and throughout the Second World War. A final solution implemented by the Syrian head-chopping, throat-slitting, gay-murdering, heart-eating, women-hating, freedom fighters that we have been supporting for a decade in Syria. Bitter, moi, extremely bitter. Not just bitter about what the head choppers have been doing in Syria against Christians, against other Muslims, against other Sunni Muslims who didn't accept the narrow interpretation of Islam of the Salafist fronts affiliated with Al-Qaeda and with ISIS. I'm angry about that, but I'm equally angry that we paid for it. I was one of the voices in the Houses of Parliament behind me that warned and warned and warned again that the Frankenstein monsters that we were supporting in Syria would one day spill out, cascade across our own streets, which they did in Paris and in London, allegedly on the very same day this week. You can't pick and choose, you see, which monsters you support and which you're going to crack down on in your own country, because these monsters recognize no borders. And the stronger you make them over there, the more dangerous they will be when they come over here. And they're here in our midst. A brave police sergeant, unarmed, shot dead in Croydon police station, inside the custody suite of a Croydon police station this week. 4 innocent passers-by just walking in the 11th arrondissement in Paris, which had the misfortune some years ago of being the place where the Charlie Hebdo magazine was based, were macheted, their throats cut, their heads almost severed from their shoulders They haven't gone away, you know, are these fanatic extremists. And now they are on the front line between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which will inevitably, as it did in Syria, draw Russia into the fight. Indeed, that may be the very point. The Turco-Russian war in Syria just got transported into the borderlands between Azerbaijan and Armenia. But of course, it's the crimes committed by these very mercenaries in Syria that will provide the first part of this show this evening. Because earlier this week, I received a document dump at an address I don't publicize from the group calling itself Anonymous. That document dump was voluminous, to say the least. I didn't have time to carefully study it all, so I sent it to my friends through the glass, saying this is important enough to lead the show on Sunday. But little did I know that all the devils in the detail would be filleted and packaged brilliantly by the estimable Grey Zone Project and one of our favorite correspondents of all time, young Ben Norton. He distilled this gigantic anonymous document dump into the most startling revelation you could possibly imagine. You see, you may have wondered how these cutthroats, head choppers, heart eaters could possibly have got such a fair press in Britain and in the West, and the answer is because you paid for it. Not that you knew it, of course. You paid for it secretly. The British government, using your money, secretly funded an entire public relations industry, providing a blizzard of white helmets and fake chemical weapons attacks and all the paraphernalia of the newly moderate Syrian opposition. You paid for all of that. You built up an entire industry of fake news about Syria. Now, most of us knew it in our hearts. Most of us smelt a rat over Duma. Most of us smelt a rat over the work of the white helmets as they climbed all the way up to the Oscars, thanking their mothers and their sisters, thanking everyone except those that helped them the most. You, the British taxpayer, spent scores of millions, maybe more than 100 million. Imagine, in this cash-strapped, COVID-stricken country, we may have spent £100 million of British taxpayers' money on fake news, propaganda for the affiliates of Al-Qaeda and ISIS, whilst hunting them in Croydon, whilst hunting them in Paris. We were paying for them in Syria. If that doesn't make you mad, you must already be dead, which is exactly what ISIS and Al-Qaeda would prefer that you were. Thanks to Anonymous, and thanks to Ben Norton and the Grey Zone, we've got the names, we've got the pack drill, we've got the check numbers, we've got the numbers in the check box. We know who was being paid what out of our money to pay for propaganda that almost over Duma took the whole world to war. Don't forget that. The fake chemical weapon attack almost brought World War III. Almost caused a superpower conflagration. between Russia, the United States of America, and its foolish or knavish allies, Britain and France, principally amongst them. I often say, as a joke, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't make this up. But they made it up. They made all of it up. And thanks to these documents from Anonymous and Ben Norton's analysis of those documents, we've got the receipts. We've got the chapter and verse. And we're going to talk to Ben Norton in the first hour on this subject. It's not just that they fooled you over Syria. I have apparently sane, grown men calling this show and talking to me about concentration camps in China. In the media, claims of 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps. It's all from the same people. It's all from the people who told you that Iraq was bristling with nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. The same people who lied to you over Syria are lying to you about China, lying to you about Russia, and they'll be lying tomorrow about Armenia. I have no doubt at all about that. And even when it's abundantly obvious that each lie turns into disaster, not just exposed as a lie, but as an actual boomerang that rebounds against our national interest and the safety of our people, our so-called media leads us over and over and over again into the same kind of morass. And we're still in a mess over the coronavirus, aren't we? We now have Glasgow as the worst affected area in Britain. We're now told that the Scottish parliamentary elections, which should have been held last May now have to be postponed again from next May. Well, I tell you now, if that's the case, then the separatist, secessionist government of Nicola Sturgeon must be replaced by a government of national unity. We cannot allow a government to stay in power, a minority government to stay in power year after year as elections are postponed and postponed. And if that does not happen, then direct rule from Westminster will have to be reimposed. Better, Miss Sturgeon, that you bring the Conservatives, Labour and the Liberal Democrats into the government. A government of national unity to combat this crisis, both health and economic, that is afflicting the people of Scotland so severely. Now, the coronavirus, which has cut a swathe through our people for the great majority of this year, will be in the third hour. And we'll be asking if the same police force that presided over the fiasco in the Croydon police station, where a man in handcuffs in a custody suite is able to murder a police officer, presumably shooting through his legs at the police officer's chest, didn't go far too far in Trafalgar Square yesterday. 10, 15,000, many of them nutters, COVID deniers, David Icke types, but many of them ordinary British citizens, exercising what they believed to be their rights of peaceful protest in the crucible of public protest in Britain, in Trafalgar Square, were set about by truncheon-wielding police officers, bowling them left and right, breaking their skulls. It didn't look good to me. It doesn't look good to me for Cressida Dick, the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. It's been a bad week for her. And it doesn't look good for the so-called mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, looking like a little boy lost as all these problems swirl around his head.